The founder of a D.C. nonprofit that serves homeless LGBTQ youth has been arrested on money laundering and fraud charges. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ruby Corado allegedly diverted at least $150,000 in emergency relief fund that was supposed to go to her nonprofit Casa Ruby. Corado is accused of moving the money to a private offshore bank account in El Salvador for her personal use. When news of her financial irregularities became public in 2022, Corado sold her home in Prince George's County and fled to El Salvador. Federal officials say she was arrested yesterday morning at a hotel in Laurel after returning to the States. Corado faces bank fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and several other charges. Bank fraud carries a maximum of 30 years in prison.
Let's take you through what happened this afternoon inside of a federal courtroom here in D.C. In the detention hearing, the prosecution pointed out that or accused Corado of fraud with pandemic-era loans. Now, according to police, Corado took PPP loans and SBA loans to the tune of more than $500,000 meant for Corado's LGBTQ plus nonprofit Casa Ruby. And instead, prosecutors say Corado sent more than $400,000 from the Casa Ruby bank account to a personal bank account in her native El Salvador under Ruby's birth name. Now, prosecutors also pointed out when allegations of fraud first dropped before they were even given to the Department of Justice, Ruby left the D.C. area, sold her home, and headed for El Salvador. Now, the defense countered by saying that those plans had been in the works for years. Ruby was going to continue her work internationally, and her defense attorneys say she has family here who will watch her while she awaits trial. Now, this is a very interesting point here. They said that as a trans woman, Corado is being kept in the men's jail, and to protect her, the defense attorney says they've had to place Corado in solitary confinement, which her defense attorney said is a cruel and unusual way to await a white-collar crime trial. Now, the judge agreed, but she says she wants every assurance that Corado will not flee to her native El Salvador again. So the judge will wait until Tuesday to rule because it's expected Ruby's sister will become her third-party custodian to assure she doesn't flee. Now, we talked to people all week who worked at Casa Ruby, and they say they would like to see justice from this upcoming trial.
I don't think we just need to be compensated for the salary. We need to be compensated for everything that we went through.
Lengthy investigation into a former CBI data scientist found that she allegedly manipulated data and cut corners, putting all of her work into question.
It's a huge story today. It all started back in September of last year when the CBI says it learned DNA scientist Missy Woods may have not followed protocols in the lab.
There's a search for answers about what happened inside this forensic lab in Jefferson County. Now almost 30 years of work by a DNA analyst at CBI is under the microscope.
It's fairly bad. Whenever you have a lab analyst that alters data in a forensic case file, that's bad.
Phil Danielson is an expert witness on DNA. He says what CBI has discovered in Missy Woods' work raises so many questions.
You're going to court and you're presenting the jury with an incomplete or, in fact, an untrue representation of the evidence.
An internal affairs investigation found Woods manipulated data, impacting more than 650 cases since 2008. There could be more, as the agency is still reviewing cases that date back to 1994.
So the question that we're all asking is, how does this scandal, and there's no other word for it, it's a scandal from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, impact these cases, and we're still figuring that out.
District Attorney Brian Mason in Adams County wants more specifics. What is clear, though, this creates a ton of work for prosecutors who now must review cases.
And it requires us now to not only review those cases and determine whether or not they need to be relitigated in any way, it means calling victims and victims' families and explaining to them the case that was resolved years ago now may not be resolved anymore.
The agency says Woods didn't make up DNA matches. Instead, she cut corners and excluded some results. After Woods worked on cases for decades, CBI became aware of potential issues last September. The timeline is creating questions too.
Exactly how did this come to light?
Colorado's public defender office says this investigation will likely mean many criminal cases will be reopened. They want to know if anyone has been wrongfully convicted. Woods' attorney says his client has never given false testimony that's resulted in a false conviction.
You think about
all the layers of something like this, and then contacting victims' families who thought things were over, just the sheer amount of court cases.
Yes, and the amount of work and the amount of money, too. The state has already requested millions of dollars to not only retest these cases, but potentially retry these cases. This is a lot of work that has been put on people.
Goodness.
Kujichagulia.